he's like, yeah, I wouldn't want to bother you guys with that. And we're like, no, this is the whole thing.
Right. Bother us.
Yeah.
We want you to bother us.
This is the whole purpose. Educating people about and helping people with their plants is part of our whole thing here.
Right.
With Take It or Leave It.
So yeah, please always, whether it's to a listener or someone that we know, some way, shape, or form, you are welcome to send me any plant related questions that you ever want to. And if I don't know, I'll let you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I'll lie and you won't know because you don't know anyway. Options. Yeah. Figuring out what I can give them from my collection. And then just tell them, like, don't you ever let this plant die. Yeah. Ever.
I'll get a cutting from my mom's philodendron that's like 40 years old and be like, I'm giving you this, but just so you know, this is 40 years old. So it's kind of a big deal if you kill it.
You'd be like, I don't want it. Like,
right? I don't think you would want it. Yeah.
Just really beautiful vine. And I just couldn't stop staring at it. It was just like, I don't know. It was like the first time I saw Jennifer Connelly. No. No, you know what? Better. Scratch that. Yeah, it's like I saw that plant and I couldn't stop staring at it. It was like, the first time I saw my wife.
I'll leave both in, though. They can decide. We'll let the listeners decide which is more believable.
Yeah. Type in euphorbia and just be amazed by the sheer, just dramatically different variety of plants that you are going to see. Everything that looks from like your stereotypical cactus down to these weird foliar plants. Poinsettia is in the euphorbia family. Mm-hmm. The funky, weird agave orchid looking plant that you have. And the thing that ties these all together is this white sap. It's just mind blowing.
How are we going to open this episode?
Sunday. Get your houseplant Sunday. We're recording on a Sunday, so it made sense.
True, it is a Sunday.
Yeah.
And
this probably won't release on a Sunday, but we're recording it on a Sunday.
Yeah. And we're recording on a Sunday because I'm still down visiting you in St. Louis.
We are knocking out some recordings.
We are. We wanted to get a few knocked out while I'm down here for several days. And among some of the stops that we've talked about in the last couple episodes, like the Best of Missouri Market at Missouri Botanic Garden, on that same day, we also made a stop at a local tea shop, which has been around for quite a few years. But we had such a great experience. I had actually been there once before. It was your first time going. But very cool owner, very cool space. And so we wanted to talk about it because the
dude remembered you.
He did.
How long ago was it when you went last? 2-3 weeks ago? Longer?
It would have been a little over a month.
Okay.
So
and he still remembered you.
I'm not even from here, and I interacted with him one time a month ago, and he totally remembered what we talked about.
What if he was just making that up? Like, yeah, I remember you. What a good marketing ploy on his end to just no matter what.
Well, he said, we were talking about your business, blah, blah. And when I mentioned
he was like, oh, yeah, I remember
some of the fair trade stuff that we had also talked about. He remembered. But yeah, so this shop is called Teatopia. And the owner is Reginald. And
this is not a paid plug.
No,
we're doing this out of the kindness of our hearts.
Yeah, we just,
and his tea is awesome and he's cool.
Yeah, he is a very cool guy. It's just a really awesome local spot in a great neighborhood. So it's technically a St. Louis address, but it's on Cherokee Street, which is relatively well known down here in the St. Louis area.
All kinds of funky little shops. There's a Mexican bakery, panaderia,
which we also went to.
Yeah,
but
that I
don't know if we could tie that into the podcast.
I got
very
a sweet potato empanada. We've talked about sweet potatoes.
Pumpkin. It was pumpkin.
It was pumpkin.
Seasonal plants. Yeah.
You got an apple churro.
Oh, I did. You're right.
There we go.
True. Plants. There we go. We tied it in.
Bam.
What was the name of that bakery?
Diana's.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Also on Cherokee Street?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
another great
spot. So good.
And so Teatopia, though, getting back to
our main pastries.
Right.
Pastries. I should talk about pastries.
Right. And that's Teatopia. His shop is in like the Benton Park neighborhood.
Kind of south of central St. Louis, south of Mobot. And yeah.
Very cool neighborhood.
Thanks for taking me there. I will absolutely go back.
Like narrow brick homes from like the late 1800s. It's a really cool neighborhood. And so we went in, and this shop, it's lots of like light woods and white walls, very contemporary design, still has the tin ceilings in parts of the room. And they don't only do tea. So the main thing is loose leaf tea. It's a tea shop, but
dozens of different varieties.
They also have a full, imported coffee machine, the whole deal.
Quite a bit of food options, too.
Yeah, a lot of food, smoothies. It's a pretty extensive menu for not being like a massive restaurant or anything like that. Really cool offerings. But yeah, the main thing is the loose leaf tea. And last time I went in with my girlfriend, and we were talking because she works in the fair trade world, and they got to talking about some fair trade related things, and he has relationships with people overseas, small farmers that he works with directly to import some of these teas, and so really high quality teas. And I'm too snobby about teas. And
I wasn't gonna say it.
I'll say it. I've had some terrible.
How do you feel about lemon and black tea, Nick?
Jesus. But so just really, he's so knowledgeable on the teas, down to brewing temperatures and steeping times and what region it came from and different notes with different type. I mean, he showed us 2 or 3 different types of black teas and pointed out the different flavor profiles of each. Last time I was there, we talked to him about some different types of oolong tea. So not only are you getting a really great experience just as a customer enjoying the tea or enjoying the food at the shop, you also, if you want to know more about it and really get into the tea, he's more than happy to talk to you about it as you're watching the tea steep and hanging out at the counter.
And being people like ourselves who already are like, we're more than happy to you give us a pedestal and we'll nerd out about a topic that we are passionate about.
Yeah.
So to see someone else in their element like that, I always like, and like this is what he does. This is what he's passionate about. This is what he loves doing. He's built this business. This is his business. You can tell he's not just doing it to make money. Right. This is something he really enjoys and was so fun, not only as far as educating you in a palatable way about something that maybe a lot of people aren't as familiar with, but also just really fun to shoot the shit with.
Yeah. And even the first time I was there, it was just, we've talked about this before with kind of the St. Louis area in general. There's really this great feeling of community, and obviously it's really cool to walk into a shop like that, having met the guy one time and have him remember the conversation from a month ago. But to see other customers come in and see him interact with people from the community, and he is familiar with these people, and there was a guy that walked in there the first time I was there. He's like, "Hey, you having the such and such smoothie?" Just really neat. He's very into the business, and it really shows.
Yeah.
And he's got hundreds of 5-star reviews, 5-star average on Google reviews. So obviously a lot of other people think the same.
A worthy destination spot.
Yeah. And so how this ties into our plant and horticulture podcast.
It doesn't.
On top of tea, which would be a fun episode to talk about tea with him.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to tag him in this and see
if he's willing to
this is our way of indirectly asking him if he wants to come on and talk about tea,
right.
I guess.
Yeah.
But the whole upper kind of high up on the walls around the whole shop, whether it's the seating area or the main area where all the tea canisters are displayed, all the shelves are full of various houseplants.
So many.
Yeah.
Pothos and ZZ plants and aloes and Dracaenias.
Swiss cheese, Monstera.
So definitely hard not to look at those plants, especially given our background. And he was getting ready to, he had those because he's getting ready to do another nice professional photo shoot for the restaurant.
For socials.
And wanted to have those plants there we were talking about. He was a little bit nervous.
Because they're all in their nursery liners right now.
Right.
He needs to pot them up in the terracotta pots.
He was like, I'm not looking forward to this. He's like,
as long as they live long enough for
man.
Yeah, as long as they live long enough for the photo shoot, right?
And we started talking about, different ways to care for him, what you can do. And did he say, I'll just message you guys? But then he backtracked.
I think I said, or one of us said, feel free to message us about it. And he's like, yeah, I wouldn't want to bother you guys with that. And we're like, no, this is the whole thing.
Right. Bother us.
Yeah.
We want you to bother us.
This is the whole purpose. Educating people about and helping people with their plants is part of our whole thing here.
Right.
Take it or leave it.
So yeah, please always, whether it's to Reginald at Teatopia or a listener or someone that we know, some way, shape, or form, even if you're just a friend of mine on my personal Facebook account, you are welcome to send me any plant-related questions that you ever want to. And if I don't know, I'll let you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I'll lie and you won't know because you don't know anyway. It's like, send me a picture of what is this? It's a tomato plant. I was like, I have never seen that type of banana in my life. Block.
Yeah.
No, it was one of those things where we were like, yes, please, please, please reach out to us. Let us know. We are more than happy to nerd. We will trade you plant knowledge for tea knowledge.
Yeah. Part of me wanted to, if I wasn't going to be out of town by the time you need to do this, part of me was thinking like, hey, I would
come back and repot all your plants for you.
Repot your plants for like some tea, some cups of tea.
Just a big jar of loose leaf tea.
Like I would, few cups of tea and some visits and repot these plants.
Repot your plants for that fancy coffee brewing machine there.
But we definitely need to bring him a plant.
Yeah.
Because he had some other plants that must have either been personal collection or given to the store kind of near the doorway there in the brighter window.
I'll donate him a plant.
Yeah, I would totally bring a plant.
So I got 152
options.
Some options, yeah. Figuring out what I can give him from my collection.
Yeah.
And then just tell him, like, don't you ever let this plant die.
Yeah.
Ever.
I'll get a cutting from my mom's philodendron that's like 40 years old and be like, oh, yeah. I'm giving you this, but just so you know, this is 40 years old, so it's kind of a big deal if you kill it.
You'd be like, I don't want it. Like,
right? No. I don't think he would want it. Yeah. Even though it'd be just as easy to care for as anything that he had there. Yeah. So another stop that we made.
On the way home.
Yeah. On the way that same day. And the inspiration for this episode, the main topic for this episode, we stopped at a nursery that, because, we can't go anywhere without stopping for a plant-related pit stop. Yeah. And this was a nursery you had worked with before for Flora Foundry.
So now I'm up to 153 houseplants now.
Right, yeah. We made some purchases. And this...
didn't want to. But then I saw the plant. I was like, damn it. It's like I'm taking this plant home with me.
Two of the plants that I came home with were ones that you initially spotted.
Right.
But the plant you got was more expensive. So I said, okay, if you're buying that one plant, I will get these two.
You just bought 2 plants.
2 plants, yeah. So this was Garden Heights Nursery, and this is, again, in the St. Louis area. It's St. Louis address, but it's kind of off of South Big Bend Boulevard.
Maplewood, Brentwood area.
Yeah, kind of like west of Forest Park.
Also a relatively popular independent garden center in the area, especially since they're like in the city.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are kind of in the outskirts suburbs of the St. Louis area, whereas Garden Heights is one of the ones in there, and they're in a pretty tight space, given that they're surrounded by a they're very metropolitan area, but they utilize their space very well. And pretty fun staff and quite a nice selection.
Yeah, both lots of options for trees, shrubs, perennials, fall-related plants outside.
Mm-hmm.
Then I really liked not only their pretty good and diverse selection of houseplants inside, as well as I love walking into a garden center and actually being able to find a really nice selection of small pots for those houseplants.
Mm-hmm.
Drives me nuts when I go to a garden center that sells houseplants and then you can't get a pot, like a nice pot for it. They also had some nice, like chemical fertilizer selection and stuff. So just a nice little shop. But so we ended up buying, like we mentioned there before.
Well, first we were nerding out about Zone 6 hardy plants since
Yes.
that's not, it's something I'm getting better at here since I now have moved down to Zone 6 from Zone 5, but still a lot of newer plants for you.
Yes.
And so we kind of walked through.
Yeah, I basically said, hey, what are kind of the half a dozen or so Zone 6 specific plants that you run into most commonly down here that I wouldn't be familiar with?
Right. And so we kind of rattled off some of those and before wandering in for looking at some funky houseplants, which was the main goal.
Yeah. And it all went downhill from there. I think we both spent, what'd we both spend? Like $50?
Yeah. I ended up, because I bought some gourds too, some little gourds, because I was going to do some cute little fall floral planters.
Container arrangements.
For the Flora Foundry. And I was not anticipating going in and buying a $50 houseplant, but it was too cool.
Yeah.
Like, damn it. I didn't want to come here and spend $50. I was thinking it's like, oh, I'll find like a cool $20 plant or something like that. I was like, nope, $50.
That was your threshold. Yeah. So what we wanted to touch on today, because, and we're going to talk about some of these in specific, we found some pretty neat, more on the rare end houseplants at Garden Heights. Hey, Ethan, do you hear that?
What?
Oh, it's an ad.
Real quick, thanks for listening to our episode today. You can stay in touch with us by supporting us on Patreon. We are at patreon.com/takeitOrLeafIt.
And we'll have bonus content on Patreon for all of our subscribers there, where you can get extra episodes and snippets from the show that we don't release to all the other platforms.
You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at Take It or Leaf It Pod. And you can also visit our website, takeitOrLeafItPod.com. If you have any questions or comments or any stories you'd like us to research or talk about, or hell, send us a picture of a plant you want us to identify, you can send that information to show@takeitOrLeafItPod.com. You can also follow us on our individual Instagrams. I am at Hortwise, HORTWISE.
And I am at N Farringdon, NFARRINGDON.
Thanks so much. We'll get back to the episode. Oh, you got me.
So what we wanted to touch on today is some of those unusual plants that we just recently got and a few others that you
have been found over the last year.
Yeah, just some ones that we have liked quite a bit, and going through and describing a little bit of those as some more fun houseplant options if any of you are more curious on some of the more funky, unusual stuff.
Yes, definitely sticking to the more obscure things, although some of them are becoming more available.
Yes.
Which I gotta say, just a little anecdotally here, coming from independent garden centers, I used to, my mentality is kind of softening on this, whereas I used to 5 years ago have a very strong opinion as far as these more rare houseplants and the price that we would buy them from wholesale at a garden center, and therefore dictating the price point that we had to sell them as, versus when you find them at a box store for half the price, if not less. And that used to really bother me, especially when I was the houseplant buyer, where, you know, I'll throw out Black Raven ZZ. That's that really nice dark purple Raven ZZ.
Purpley black.
Yeah. And, you know, if I was going to buy that from a wholesale provider, you know, my landed cost with freight would be $22 a plant or something in a 6-inch pot, meaning I had to market to sell at $50, you know, just to make it worth and be a profitable sale for the business.
Especially earlier on when they first came out.
Right. And then
I'll touch on some of those reasonings for
exactly
why pricing is that way.
And then you would go and you'd see it at a box store for $20.
Yep, 6 months later.
And that used to irritate me so much, because I knew that those places that were selling it for $20 just weren't really, there's no way they're hitting the same margin.
Mm-mm.
And I would always kind of create this argument. It's like, well, no, the box stores that are selling them that cheap, it's just an extra add-on sale for them. They're not as worried about the margin necessarily, whereas an independent garden center is so focused on the margin. That's how we make our money.
Well, I don't even know if you can maybe make quite that much of a generalization, because a huge part of why plant material, whether that be interior plants, house plants at somewhere like, say, a Home Depot or a Lowe's, for example, one of those big box stores, or some of the more landscape related things, trees, shrubs, perennials, outdoors, even their annuals. When Home Depot places an order for houseplants, they're buying hundreds of thousands or millions of them. Whereas
we're buying 2 dozen.
Yeah, even a multi-million-dollar, pretty large garden center, like some of the ones that we've worked at, you're getting a few semi-loads a year, and Home Depot across the nation is getting many thousands of semis a year. So the buying power is a lot different. They can have growers that only
pricing.
Supply them because they're saying, there's not a lot of people who can supply that kind of crazy quantity. So there are some people who just contract out for the box stores. And when you're a grower that has 1 or 2 clients that you're growing for, and at that kind of scale, you really get a lot of flexibility on the margins and your cost of that plant material buying it wholesale when you're ordering in the millions than when you're ordering in the hundreds like we would be.
Right.
So, which makes it tough for the independent garden centers. And that's why we always really try to promote to our listeners to support those local independent garden centers. And it's like, yes, maybe you could be paying a few dollars more for something similar that you could get at, say, a Home Depot or a Lowe's, but you're getting a lot more with that extra cost. You're supporting a small local business. You're supporting people who work in your area. You're able to access people who generally are going to have a lot more industry specific, in-depth, real hands-on experience with that plant material to be able to give you really good, accurate advice. A lot of times they can help you if you have issues with that plant down the road. Some places offer warranties, things like that. So that's why we always really try to promote helping out those local independents.
Right. And that being said, I'm not against rescuing a plant from a box store every once in a while.
Yeah, I always
call it a Walmart rescue or a Home Depot rescue.
I always tell people, if they're really needing to get a plant from a box store, make sure you get it within a day or 2 after it got off the truck.
Right.
Because after that, it can be dicey. And part of that reason why some of those places don't super care about maintaining those plants properly, one, they don't always hire people who have that really in-depth industry knowledge. Sometimes it's subcontracted out to other people to come in and maintain. But a lot of them operate on a pay by scan structure with their wholesale suppliers. And what that means is they don't pay their supplier for that plant until it goes through the register.
Yep.
So if 10 racks of plants off of a semi die because they didn't get watered or unwrapped for 5-6 days in July, they don't really have an incentive to do things otherwise because they don't have to pay for it because it didn't go through the register. It didn't actually sell. And again, that's kind of a buying power related thing, because when you're ordering in the millions, you kind of get to dictate things. We would even see that when I was ordering, when I was a head grower, with something like ordering pots to grow the plants in. If Home Depot decided they wanted a different pot color, a different shape, it would change the manufacturing capacity and processes for the people even producing pots, because who is going to spend the most money and buy the biggest quantity? Not me buying, a few tens of thousands of pots. They're going to cater to somebody who says, hey, we want millions of these and we want them to look this way. So that's kind of part of why you can see some of those price differences.
Sure. So circling back and around to like what we picked up at Garden Heights, and then we'll talk about some other funky plants that we've picked up over the year.
Yeah, do you want to talk about the vine that you got?
Yeah, so that $50 frickin' vine that I got. really beautiful. It's called a Piper crocatum, and it is related to the peppercorn pepper, which is not the same plant as like a jalapeno pepper or a bell pepper plant. Peppercorn is that tabletop pepper is what this plant is related to, not the same
It's
relation.
essentially like the seed of a little berry that grows on this vine.
Right. Yeah. Not to be associated with, like I said, jalapenos, habaneros, bell peppers, that sort of type of pepper plant.
Black pepper.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it is a non-fruiting variety, or at the very least, the likelihood of it fruiting as a house plant is
it's an ornamental.
Extremely minimal. Yeah. Right. But it's this cool, deep, dark green foliage with these vibrant, hot pink veins.
Like purpley, kind of pinky purpley.
Yeah. Yeah. Just really beautiful vine. And I just couldn't stop staring at it. It was just like, I don't know. It was like the first time I saw Jennifer Connelly. No. I was just like, oh, there you are.
Saw from across the room.
Yeah. No, you know what? Better. Scratch that. Yeah, it's like I saw that plant and I couldn't stop staring at it. It was like, the first time I saw my wife. And it's just like, she's going to be my wife.
Yeah.
Do you think that'll earn me brownie points?
I think she'll call you out on bullshit.
Oh.
Yeah. I'll leave both in, though. They can decide. We'll let the listeners decide which is more believable.
Yeah. Okay. The first time I saw Jennifer Connelly versus the first time I saw my wife.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This one isn't going to cause problems in my relationship at all.
No.
All right. Perfect. But yeah, just a beautiful plant. And there were two people that were kind of stationed in that houseplant area. One of them was giving me more information than the other as far as care, and essentially just like, so just essentially treat it the same way I would some of my other vining plants that I have. And I'm pretty excited to see how it goes.
Yeah.
So that was the funky rare plant there. So I can't really go in depth about what it is and my experience with it because it's brand new to me. It was the first time I'd ever seen it.
Yeah, TBD on your experience with it.
But I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes and doing some propagations down the road and seeing how it takes.
In spring.
I'm not going to do any now. In fact, she also instructed me not to. She's like, I really don't recommend, even though this might be okay, but she was like, don't do it now. And I was like, I'm cool with waiting, especially with this being that expensive of a plant. Like, I will leave it alone over winter and address it in spring.
And what we're going to do for all these plants is we're going to do a little photo shoot after we record this episode and post pictures of those in a group to our socials so that you guys can all get an idea of exactly what we're talking about. Because I know obviously we can only describe to you so much listening what these plants look like.
Right. So
before you saw the Piper vine, you had also spotted both of the plants that I ended up walking out with. One was, and this is only marked as, it's a type of euphorbia, so it's a succulent, and it was marked as Euphorbia specialis african. Now, I know that's probably a little bit of a generic name if I had to guess.
Yeah, when I searched it just now, several different varieties of euphorbia came up.
Yeah, so we'll post a picture of that, but what was really striking about it is the base kind of sitting right above the soil line in that pot. Is
almost Codex-like.
Yeah, it's very kind of like bulbous, almost like it reminded us of a couple kinds of orchids, like kind of like that dendrobium and cattleya type orchids that get that kind of succulent base right above the ground before they get their leaves. And so it's very similar to that. And that drew you in. And once you decided to buy your other plant, I was like, hey, I'm going to get this one.
I saw it and I was like, that's kind of like an agave and a dendrobium orchid had a baby.
Yeah. It's a kind of an odd one. Something neither of us had seen before. So naturally, one of us has to buy it. Yep. And the other one is a variety of a tropical foliage plant that's a little more common.
Yeah.
A type of goldfish plant or
goldfish flower.
Yeah.
Nematanthus.
And this is in particular Nematanthus tropicana. And the difference, so a normal goldfish plant, it's a very glossy, shiny green, kind of small, usually you see them in a hanging basket, kind of a bushy green tropical plant. But when it flowers, the flower looks like a little kind of sunny yellow orange little goldfish. And
like a little goldfish cracker. Yeah. It's kind of like if
sort of, yeah. It's got the little opening of the flower. It looks like the little mouth. It's very cute. And what drew you and also me to this and why I ended up buying it is this is a bicolor flower that's kind of a burgundy red mottled with yellow, which is very unusual.
And it was super cheap.
Yeah, it was
less than $10.
Right.
For this, and they only had 2 of them left.
Yep.
And you obviously got the way better.
Didn't she say they just came in?
That day.
Yeah.
All these plants that we bought came in that day.
Yeah.
And there was only 1 of those euphorbias, 2 of those goldfish plants, and 5 of the piper vines that one of which I bought.
Yeah. So that was the other
timing.
Really cool one. We'll send a picture or we'll post a picture of that as well. And then one that you had bought there, not when we were there together, but you bought a couple of them and gave me one, was the dead stick plant, which is also a Euphorbia platyclada.
Euphorbia is just so expansive.
They look wildly different.
So type in, this is our homework we're assigning to the listeners. Type in Euphorbia, EUPHORBIA into your
images.
Google search.
Yep.
And just be amazed by the sheer, just dramatically different variety of plants that you are going to see. Everything that looks from like your stereotypical cactus down to these weird foliar plants. Poinsettia is in the Euphorbia family. And the thing that ties these all together is this white sap. Which is kind of this go-to characteristic of many things that are in the Euphorbia genus.
Yeah, kind of a sticky, opaque, white, milky sap.
So funky cacti with the needles all the way to like the pencil cactus, which many people might be familiar with. Like I said, the poinsettia.
Or fire stick.
Fire stick, right. Yeah. The funky, weird agave orchid-looking plant that you have. It's just mind-blowing. I'm wondering if we're ever going to get to a point where they have to start
breaking it up a little bit.
Yeah, and figure out like, okay, this is like euphorbids, and these are euphorbias, and these are euphorcupids, or whatever.
Right, who knows?
Yeah, just bizarre to me. Anyway, just a fascinating genus of plants.
And this dead stick plant
it looks dead.
It's like a green-brown mottled camouflagey kind of low.
It kind of look like a coral sort of looking, like a funky coral where if you saw it at the bottom of the ocean, you'd be like, oh, that coral's dead.
Yeah. Too much CO2. Some diver touched it.
Yep.
Yeah. Very weird, very funky. And now we have matching ones. Yep.
I couldn't help wanting to get some of those and just saw, and it was like, so I bought us each one when I was there previously. Like, oh, never seen that one. Oh, it's a Euphorbia. Holy crap.
Yep.
Gotta get it. And I'm very curious to see how that's going to grow.
Yeah.
And
the new growth looks normal, like bright green.
And with it being a Euphorbia, generally that means pretty drought tolerant. Most things in the Euphorbia that we will interact with is that now poinsettias they're very different, but what makes a poinsettia the way that we see poinsettias here in the holiday seasons,
heavily modified.
Right. But poinsettias in southern areas in Latin America and southern parts of the United States.
Yeah, it's like a ditch weed shrub.
Yeah, they're very drought tolerant, but they don't grow necessarily the same way with the vibrant reds and whites and pinks that we see poinsettias at the store.
So those were the 4 from Garden Heights. And then you wanted to touch on 3 different philodendrons and a monstera that you have picked up.
Which will kind of lead into you're kind of talking about, the availability of these plants and why they are becoming more available at more reasonable prices.
Yeah.
So I did find a white princess and a white knight philodendron. And they have this very dramatic white variegation to the foliage.
So like a green and white mix modeling.
Right. Sometimes to such an extreme where literally half the leaf will be green and half the leaf will be white.
Like totally pure white.
Right. White. And sorry, bad. Come on, that's funny. And the white princess is essentially just a variant of another very social media, internet famous philodendron, the pink princess philodendron, sometimes just referred to as the PPP. It is. It is. And
Okay.
they refer to it as the PPP. It is the PPP.
Not to be confused with the government loans during COVID.
And I think part
Payment
of
protection loans.
I think that stemmed from the fact that it like got super popular during COVID, when we saw this massive boost in houseplant sales and this huge want and following for more rare and obscure houseplants.
And whether you know these by name or not, when we post pictures of these, you will, if you are involved at all in anything plant related on social media, you will recognize these.
Especially the pink princess.
They were very popular, like you said, on the socials kind of during COVID and after. And at that time, I mean, for a little plant in a 6-inch pot, you could pay $40 to $80, depending on where you were getting it.
Oh, more pink princess philodendron at its heyday on the internet.
Which online you'll always pay more, especially if it's something new.
People were dropping $100, $200 on a mildly rooted cutting of a. In fact, the pink princess was getting the demand for it was so high that people were injecting other types of philodendrons and cuttings of philodendrons with red food coloring, especially ones that might have had like a mild greenish or yellowish variegation to them, and injecting them or watering them with red dyed water to turn those variegated portions a red pinkish hue, and then selling those cuttings
as a
counterfeit plant, and then like drop in their store. They would sell a whole bunch of these, drop their store, no longer be available, and all these people would have counterfeit cuttings of pink princess. Just that's what it turned into. It's just so wild. So anyway, the white princess is a cousin of that super cool plant. The white knight is just bigger. It's a larger leaf. I think it grows to be generally a larger sized plant as well.
It looks like it's probably going to be a little more on the kind of bushier type, whereas the others look like they're going to be more
mild trailing or
type.
Climbing. So very excited about both of those. The white princess I found at an independent garden center in the area, Chesterfield Valley Nursery. And the white knight, and this is the only place I've ever seen the white knight, it was a box store purchase. But it was so cheap, and I'd never seen it anywhere before, so I bought it. But I'm not going to feel bad about it.
I'll give you a pass, I guess.
Okay, cool. But yeah, and then like I said,
silently judge you.
Right. So then, like I said, I already talked about the pink princess. What's really fun for me when I think or talk about the pink princess philodendron is just knowing that it was only a couple years ago that this plant was like this $200 online purchase, and people were buying it, and it was almost like this this
like a luxury good.
Yeah, you know, it was like gave you this. I would always joke during this height of 2020 COVID and houseplant buying. I was like, oh yeah, you got stocks, you got cryptocurrency, and you got houseplants. Like these are what you can gauge your monetary value as. And so now we're at this point where the pink princess, due to tissue culture, which you're going to talk about, it's now so available that you can just buy it $20 any box store now.
Yeah.
In fact, it's so popular and not expensive that I found it at Missouri Botanical Gardens, just planted in the landscape. Right. Just a little grouping of 3 of them. It was like, they've just planted pink princess philodendrons just in the ground. They're just like, just throw them in the ground. It's fine. Yeah. They weren't that expensive. It's like, wow, how the mighty have fallen from this super rare luxury
and that's too. Same thing with the other one you wanted to mention.
The Thai constellation Monstera is also starting to get to that point. Once upon a time, many, many, many hundreds of dollars. In fact,
sometimes even for a cutting.
Oh yeah, for a cutting, sometimes an unrooted cutting. If you were buying at this time a 2020 year 2020 Thai constellation that was already like a grown plant rooted in a 6-inch, 8-inch pot, hundreds, if not maybe even breaching into the thousands of dollars.
Yeah. And this is, for anyone who's not familiar with that, probably most people know the Monstera deliciosa. They're everywhere, from the little pop socket things on the back of your phone, used on that, to stickers, to
It's a very popular leaf.
backgrounds on social media. And I've seen it as an earring. It's everywhere as like a fake plant, as a silk stem.
It's like the poster child for tropical plants.
Yeah. So this Thai constellation had the speckled white variegation in the leaf, and that was still is relatively uncommon to find. Still a very expensive plant. I mean, a 6-inch rooted plant, relatively small, not getting the little holes in the leaves, the fenestrations in the leaves yet. Still, what, $100?
Right.
Easily,
Although they're
100
coming
to 200.
They're coming to be much more. I think they're going to start hitting the shelves here pretty inexpensively, between $25 and $35
Probably
for a 4-inch to 6-inch pot. But yeah, another fun plant there. I finally was able to get my own. But yeah, that's another very interesting how the mighty have fallen. This plant that was hundreds upon hundreds of dollars for an unrooted cutting online a couple years ago, to now being available pretty soon here at mini box stores and independent garden centers for
tens of dollars.
Right, for a much more reasonable price, and it's rooted in a pot with soil. But I remember it was 2020 and purchasing houseplants at this garden center that I worked at, and I'm talking to one of the vendors out of Florida that I would buy from a lot of different funky things. And we were talking about the Thai constellation Monstera. And I asked him, do you have any of those? Are you going to be selling those wholesale? And he was like, no way. And I was like, really? And he was like, oh, we have several mother plants, meaning, so those are the general term for plants that they will use for propagating and taking stem cuttings for. And they were just using them just for that. So they had 3 large mother plants of the Thai constellation that they were just taking. He's like, we're making a killing just selling these online, like eBay. And he's like, there's no way
they don't want to dilute the market.
Right. There's no way that we can sell them to you because I can sell cuttings online for $100.
Yeah.
So it's not going to hit wholesale for years.
Right.
And I was just like, dang. I was like, I appreciate the honesty. Pretty cool.
What Ethan kind of alluded to earlier, and why these plants can become cheaper within the kind of 1 to 5 year range after they're introduced, is because of advancements in what we know as tissue culture technology and tissue culture science. And we actually, several months ago, shot an episode all about tissue culture, which we've yet to release because we felt like it was a little too technical, maybe. So I'm going to describe it in kind of shorter terms, just briefly here, to explain why some of these plants can become so cheap and available, especially even at the box stores, in such a short window. But if you guys like the concept of this topic, we'd be open to releasing that episode at some point down the road.
Maybe it's a Patreon episode.
Yeah, could be. So essentially what tissue culture is, especially the one that's used more in our world of ornamental horticulture, is taking some part of the original plant, whether that be some cell scrapings or some tip cuttings or whatever part of that plant, and in a sterile lab environment, in a very particular growing media, you more or less create clones of that original plant through multiplying them in vitro, so in this lab environment, sterile, and you can take one plant and multiply it out to many thousands, if not millions, in that environment in a relatively short amount of time.
And different than like taking cuttings, where that's also a clone.
Right.
But you're going to burn through way more of that plant. And where
you're cutting
a big full
pieces.
plant, you might be able to get couple dozen cuttings. Whereas this, you get, like you said, thousands of clones of this plant now.
Yeah, if not into the millions. And so in this lab environment, they're multiplying it out. The Phalaenopsis, or moth orchid, was one of the original ones that really blew up, and that's, any of you have probably seen that at a grocery store.
That's where
or
you can
a
find it
box
for
store.
$15-$20.
Right. That orchid that you always see, multiple different colors with the big wide oval leaf that's like 8 to 12 inches long, and they have a few of those big green wide leaves, and then the stalk of orchid blooms at the top. Those are also produced through tissue cultures in labs, primarily in Asia. And, just like orchids used to be really difficult to find and very expensive, now, because they can very readily produce, once you get an orchid that you like the color of that bloom, even if it's a hybrid, you're not planting these from seeds. You're taking some part of the plant, some organ of the plant, and multiplying this out in this lab environment. And
like little petri dishes. Like they'll grow these in petri dishes.
In a little special media. Yep. And that's how you can really quickly multiply these plants out. I don't think it works quite for everything, but they've done it for agaves. That's a common one. They'll do it for...
I didn't know that with agaves.
Yeah, because agaves used to take
they used to be so expensive to the point where like we didn't even bother buying them when we were buying wholesale because like I can't flip that agave for $40.
Right.
But now they've become much more reasonably priced.
It's very common with philodendrons and monsteras, certain types of tropical foliage, to shrubs like hydrangeas. You'll see it sometimes. Some of the funkier coneflower perennial varieties, really kind of a whole range with that technique as that science has improved in the last several decades to what it is today. And so when you have something like the White Knight or the White or Pink Princess or the Thai constellation, that then becomes an option. You have that initial plant and you can multiply it out. Well, one of the things that can complicate this and limit the availability on the market is it's not uncommon for a select few breeders and people with these tissue culture labs to essentially patent the rights to that type of plant. And so you might have one person controlling the whole supply for Raven ZZ plants or the whole supply for the Thai constellation Monstera, because they have the money and the resources and the labs to do this tissue culture propagation. So they can kind of control when and how and where it initially hits the broader market, most often to the box stores. So that's why you could see online or at an independent garden center, maybe a Thai constellation in a little 6-inch or a 4-inch pot for $100, $200, $300 early on. And then all of a sudden you'll see it at Home Depot or Lowe's for $19.99 because that one supplier controlled who and when they sold it to. And once they can produce them in the millions, now they can wholesale them out to people who are looking to buy plants in the millions. And who has the money to do that? Multinational chains. So that's kind of the very brief rundown of kind of the concept of what tissue culture is and why those plants can go from being insanely expensive to all of a sudden they're everywhere. Everybody and their brother has one for $20. So that's kind of why that can happen.
Yeah.
I know we had some tangents there, but I think that kind of wraps up what we wanted to hit as far as some of these funky varieties that the both of us have picked up this year in terms of houseplants, since we've been on a little bit of a houseplant kick for themes for some of the last couple episodes.
Yeah, I think that wraps it up.
All righty. Well, this has been the Rare Houseplants episode for the Take It or Leave It podcast. I'm Nick Farringdon.
I'm Ethan Wise.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.